The day after we buried my wife, someone rearranged my kitchen. Not completely. That would have been too obvious. Just enough to make me hesitate. The sugar bowl moved from the left of the kettle to the right. The knives, my knives, the ones I had sharpened myself for 30 years, were placed blade up in a new wooden holder. Even the mugs had been reorganized by size, not by habit. Eleanor used to say that a kitchen remembers its owner. That morning, mine felt like it had already started forgetting me. You shouldn't be alone right now. Patricia stood in the doorway, framed by the soft hum of the refrigerator. She wore black, of course, tasteful, expensive black, not the kind that wrinkles when you sit too long. Behind her, my son Daniel hovered, hands in his pockets, looking like a man waiting for instructions. "I'm fine," I said, though I was holding the edge of the counter a little tighter than necessary. "You say that," Patricia replied gently, stepping inside. "But grief doesn't work like that." Grief. She pronounced it like a diagnosis. She crossed the kitchen with quiet confidence and reached for the kettle. "You didn't even plug it in," she added, her tone soft but precise. I hadn't noticed. That irritated me more than it should have. "I was about to," I muttered. "Of course," she smiled. That smile, warm, patient, slightly tilted, would become very familiar to me. At the time, I thought it meant kindness. I was 72 years old, recently widowed, and standing in a kitchen that no longer obeyed my memory. Kindness felt like something I could afford to trust. That was my first mistake. By the end of February 2023, Patricia had a system. It started small. "Let me handle the groceries, Dad. You shouldn't be lifting heavy bags." Then, I noticed a few overdue bills on the counter. "Why don't I set up automatic payments for you? And then, it might be easier if I just had access to your account. Strictly for emergencies." Strictly. That word does a lot of work when people are lying to you. I remember the exact date I gave her access. March 14th, 2023.11:40 a.m. We were sitting at my dining table. The same one Eleanor and I bought in 1998 from a clearance sale at Sears. Solid oak, still sturdy, unlike me apparently. Patricia had her laptop open. Daniel sat beside her, nodding along like a polite assistant. "It's just a formality," he said, "in case something happens." Something already had happened. Eleanor was gone. What else were they preparing for? I should have asked that question then. Instead, I signed. My hand didn't even tremble. My pension was $4,100 a month. Social Security added another $2,300. Total monthly income, $6,400. My expenses before Patricia's involvement rarely exceeded $2,200. I had savings $312,000 in a conservative investment account, plus $180,000 in a money market fund. The house was paid off in 2011. No debts, no obligations. A clean life, financially speaking. The kind Eleanor and I had built over 46 years of careful decisions and quiet discipline. Patricia looked at those numbers and saw something else entirely. Opportunity. "Dad, your utility bill seems unusually high," she said one morning in April, scrolling through my statements. "Spring rates went up," I replied. "They always do." Still, she frowned. "We should optimize things." Optimize. Another word that sounds harmless until it isn't. A week later, she replaced my thermostat with a smart system. "It'll save you money in the long run," she said. I didn't ask how much it cost. I would later find out. $1,280. Charged to my account. Installed by a company owned by her cousin. But at the time, I just nodded and thanked her. Because that's what you do when someone is helping you. You become grateful before you become suspicious. Daniel visited more often after that. Not to talk. Not really. He would sit in the living room, scrolling through his phone, while Patricia moved through the house like a quiet administrator. "Did you take your medication?" she'd ask me. "I don't have medication." "You should," she'd reply almost absently. That sentence stayed with me. You should. Not you need. Not the doctor says. Just you should. Like a suggestion planted in soft soil. Looking back, that was the moment something shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Like a chair leg slightly shorter than the others. You don't fall immediately. But eventually you will. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. By May, I had stopped opening my own mail, not because I couldn't, because there was no point. Patricia had taken over that ritual as well, standing by the front door at exactly 9:15 every morning, sorting envelopes with the quiet efficiency of a bank clerk. "John Hunk," she'd say, tossing half of them straight into the trash without showing me. "Bills," she'd add, stacking the rest neatly. And sometimes, rarely, she would pause. "This one's important. I'll take care of it. Take care of it." That phrase became the soundtrack of my life. I noticed that fewer envelopes made it to the table each week. At first, I assumed companies had switched to digital statements. That's what Patricia told me anyway. "Everything's online now, Dad. It's safer." Safer for whom, I wondered, but I didn't ask. Not yet. The house had changed in other ways too. Small things. Always small things. My study, once filled with folders, receipts, decades of neatly labeled records, was reorganized. "You had too much clutter," Patricia explained, holding up a cardboard box. "I archived everything." Archived. That box disappeared into the garage. I never saw it again. In its place, she set up a sleek black printer. Wireless. Password protected. "I'll handle any documents you need," she said. Of course she would. "Dad, we need to talk about expenses." That conversation happened on June 3rd, 2023.7:20 p.m. I remember because I had just reheated leftover chicken soup, Eleanor's recipe, though I never quite got the salt right. Too careful, perhaps. Eleanor used to say I was afraid of flavor. Patricia sat across from me at the table, her laptop open again. Daniel stood by the sink, pretending to rinse a glass that was already clean. "Your monthly spending has increased," she said, turning the screen toward me. Numbers filled the display. Clean, organized, professional. Too professional. From $2,200 to approximately $5,900. I blinked. "That's not possible." "It is," she replied calmly. "Here, utilities, subscriptions, home improvements, medical preparations." "Medical preparations?" She smiled slightly. "Preventative care." I stared at the numbers. $1,200. Home efficiency upgrades. $860. Household services. $2,400. Renovation deposit. Renovation. I looked up. "What renovation?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Just some minor updates. For safety." "Safety." "You know," Patricia said, leaning forward, lowering her voice as if speaking to a child. "Aging in place requires adjustments. Handrails, bathroom modifications." "I didn't ask for any of that." "No," she agreed softly. "But you need it." There it was again. Not want. Not choice. Need. "I'm perfectly capable of living in my own house," I said, sharper than intended. A pause. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Patricia didn't. "No one is saying you aren't," she replied. "We're just planning ahead." Planning. Always planning. For a future I hadn't agreed to. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the television flickering silently, casting pale light across furniture that suddenly felt temporary. At 11:47 p.m., I heard voices from the kitchen. Low, careful. I stood up slowly, joints protesting, and moved closer. "He doesn't even notice," Daniel was saying. "Of course he doesn't," Patricia replied. We eased into it. A pause, then quieter. "The refinance should go through by August. The house is valued at $780,000 now. Even a 60% line gives us nearly $468,000. My breath caught. Refinance. My house. "He signed everything already?" Daniel asked. "Not yet," Patricia said. "But he will." "How can you be so sure?" A soft laugh. "Because by then," she said, "he won't even realize what he's signing." Silence stretched in the dark hallway. I stood there, one hand against the wall, feeling something cold and precise settle into place inside my chest. Not fear. Not yet. Something else. Recognition. For the first time since Eleanor died, the house felt exactly like it used to. Clear, honest, unforgiving. And I understood something with absolute certainty. Nothing in my kitchen had been rearranged by accident. I did not confront them the next morning. That would have been the natural reaction. Emotional, immediate, completely useless. Instead, I made coffee. Black. No sugar. Eleanor always said sugar hides the truth. I sat at the kitchen table at exactly 8:30 a.m., just as I had done for the past 20 years, and waited. Patricia entered at 8:42. "Good morning, Dad," she said, already reaching for the cabinet where she had moved the mugs. "Morning." I watched her pour coffee into 2 cups. One for me, one for herself. Routine is a powerful disguise. It makes theft look like care. "You didn't sleep well," she observed. "I'm old," I replied. "That's part of the package." She smiled. "Exactly why we need to stay ahead of things." Stay ahead of me, apparently. At 10:15, after Daniel had left for work and Patricia was upstairs on a call, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went into my study and closed the door. The new printer sat there like a quiet accusation. Black, polished, obedient to someone else. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Password protected. Of course. I looked around the room. Clean. Too clean. No papers, no folders, no trace of the life I had documented for decades. But Patricia had made one mistake. She underestimated habit, and habit leaves backups. Old men don't trust computers. We keep paper. Not all of it had been moved. Behind the lower drawer of my desk, slightly warped from years of humidity, there was a thin gap, just enough to slide documents into. Eleanor used to joke that I was hiding state secrets. "Only from the children," I'd reply. I reached in. My fingers found the envelope immediately. Beige, worn at the corners. Inside, copies, bank statements, quarterly summaries, handwritten notes in my own careful script. Numbers don't lie. People do. By noon, I was sitting in my car outside First National Bank. Same branch, same parking lot, same faded blue sign I had trusted for 37 years. I hadn't told Patricia I was leaving. That alone felt significant. Inside, the air smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and something older. Paper, maybe. Stability. A young teller smiled at me. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "I'd like to review my account activity in detail." Her smile flickered, then returned. "Of course." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a small office with a man named Gregory Halpern. Branch manager, mid-40s, careful eyes. He printed everything. All accounts, all transactions, March through June. He slid the stack across the desk. "Is there something specific you're looking for, Mr. Whitaker?" I adjusted my glasses. "Yes," I said quietly. "The truth. It took 23 minutes. That's how long it took for my life to stop making sense." March 16th, $8,500. Home systems upgrade. March 28th, $12,200. Consulting services. April 4th, $3,900. Medical supply advance. April 19th, $27,000. Contractor deposit. May 2nd, $6,750. Subscription services. May 17th, $14,300. Interior modifications. May 29th, $9,800. Financial structuring fee. I turned the pages slowly. Each number landed heavier than the last. "Do you recognize these charges?" Gregory asked. "No," I said. That was the first honest answer I'd given in months. "Who has authorized access to your accounts?" "My daughter-in-law." He paused. "Full access?" "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. "That carries certain risks." I almost laughed. Risks. That was a polite word for what I was seeing. By the end of June, a total of $118,450 had been moved, spent, or reallocated. In less than 4 months. Without a single real conversation. Without a single clear explanation. Without my consent. At least, not informed consent. That distinction matters. Legally. And, as I was beginning to understand personally, I gathered the papers into a neat stack. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Anger usually shakes a man. This wasn't anger. Not yet. This was something colder. More precise. "How quickly," I asked Gregory, "can access permissions be changed?" He met my eyes. Immediately. I nodded. "Good," I said. Then I leaned back slightly, exhaling for what felt like the first time all day. "Because I think," I added, "I've been very generous with someone who mistook that for weakness." Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the windshield of my car. Bright, sharp, unforgiving, just like the numbers I now held in my hands. I did not revoke her access that day. That would have been satisfying, immediate, clean, and completely premature. Instead, I thanked Gregory, folded the statements into a plain manila envelope, and walked out of the bank like a man who had just paid a bill, which in a way I had, only this one was long overdue. On the drive home, I stopped at a hardware store on Maple Avenue. Not because I needed anything, because I needed time. Old habit. When something doesn't make sense, you walk aisles. You look at things that are simple. Nails, screws, tools that do exactly what they're supposed to do. No hidden fees, no consulting charges. Just weight, purpose, honesty. I bought a $12 flashlight I didn't need. Paid in cash. That detail mattered more than it should have. When I got home, Patricia was in the kitchen, exactly where I expected her to be. "Where'd you go?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "Out," I said, setting the flashlight on the counter. A small pause. She noticed it. "You bought something?" "Yes." "What for?" I met her eyes. "Light," I said. She held my gaze for half a second too long, then smiled. "Very funny." Was it? That evening I made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive. Structured. If they thought I was slipping, then I would give them exactly what they expected. Because people like Patricia don't prepare for resistance. They prepare for compliance. And I had been very, very compliant. The next morning, I left the front door slightly open. Not enough to be obvious. Just careless enough. At 9:15, Patricia noticed. "Dad, you left the door open again," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of concern wrapped in quiet accusation. "Did I?" I frowned. Must have slipped my mind. She exchanged a quick glance with Daniel. There it was. Confirmation. A seed planted and watered. By noon, she had called someone. I heard it from the hallway. "It's getting worse," she said softly. "He's forgetting basic things now." A pause. "Yes, I think we should move forward." Move forward. Always forward. Toward something that never included me. Over the next week, I made small adjustments. Deliberate ones. I repeated questions. Forgot appointments I never had. Left lights on in empty rooms. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to build a pattern. Just enough to make their narrative believable. It was a strange thing to perform your own decline. To watch people accept it without hesitation. To realize how little proof they actually needed. Meanwhile, I prepared, quietly, carefully. The envelope from the bank stayed hidden beneath the lining of my coat closet. Not the study. Never the study again. I purchased a small digital recorder. $47.99 at an electronics store 20 minutes away. No loyalty numbers. No receipts tied to my account. Cash again. I began to document. Not everything. Just enough. Fragments of conversation. Phrases. Tone. He won't understand the paperwork. Power of attorney makes it clean. Once the line of credit clears were covered, numbers followed those words. $450,000. $780,000. $300,000 draw. They spoke in figures, the way surgeons speak in measurements. Precise. Detached. Clinical. It would have impressed me under different circumstances. On July 12th, at 6:40 p.m., Patricia placed a folder in front of me at the dining table. Same table. Same spot. History has a sense of humor. "We should get this signed," she said gently. Daniel stood behind her this time, not beside her. "Interesting. What is it?" I asked, adjusting my glasses. "Just some paperwork," she replied, "to make things easier moving forward." Easier. I opened the folder slowly. Legal language. Clean formatting. Professional. But I knew what I was looking at before I reached the second page. Home equity line of credit. Maximum amount. $468,000. Secured against my house. My house. The one Eleanor and I had paid off brick by brick, year by year. "Do I need this?" I asked. Patricia leaned forward, her voice soft, reassuring. "Not right now," she said, "but it's smart to have options." Options? For whom? I picked up the pen, held it above the signature line, paused. Not too long. Just enough. Then I smiled faintly and signed. Because sometimes the only way to expose a lie is to let it finish speaking. The money came faster than I expected. August 3rd, 2023.9:12 a.m. I know the exact time because Patricia called Daniel the moment the notification arrived. "It's approved," she whispered, though she was standing alone in the kitchen. Full amount, $468. A pause. "Yes," she added, her voice tightening with excitement. "We can move now." Move. Such a simple word for something so deliberate. I was sitting in the living room, television on volume low, staring at a program I wasn't watching. They didn't bother lowering their voices anymore. That was the second shift. The first is secrecy. The second is confidence. Confidence is louder. By mid-August, the house began to fill with strangers, contractors, inspectors, men with clipboards and laser measuring tools, walking through rooms as if they were already sold. This wall could come down, one of them said, tapping the kitchen divider with his knuckles. Open concept? Patricia nodded. Better resale value. Resale, not renovation, not safety. Resale. Daniel stood beside her, arms crossed, pretending to understand. What do you think, Dad? He asked at one point, glancing in my direction like a man remembering a line he was supposed to deliver. I looked up slowly. About what? A flicker of irritation crossed his face. The kitchen. Oh, I said. It's fine. He nodded, relieved by the lack of resistance. That was all they needed from me now. Silence. The withdrawals started on August 10th. Structured, careful, professional. $50,000. Initial contractor payment. $75,000. Design and structural planning. $120,000. Property optimization fund. Optimization, a beautiful word for theft. By the end of the month, $245,000 had been drawn from the credit line. Nearly half. Not hidden, not disguised, just justified, because I had signed, because I was declining, because they had decided I no longer needed to understand. On August 28th, Patricia hosted a dinner. That was new. She called it a small gathering. 6 people, 2 couples I didn't know, a man in a Navy suit who introduced himself as Mark, financial advisor, and Daniel at the head of the table, playing host in a house that wasn't his. The table was set properly. Good plates, real silverware. Eleanor would have approved. That thought irritated me. Your father-in-law has been incredibly forward-thinking, Mark said halfway through the meal, swirling his wine like he was evaluating it. Not everyone is willing to leverage assets this efficiently. I kept my eyes on my plate. Chicken, overcooked. Patricia never learned patience in the kitchen. He trusts us, she replied smoothly. Trust, such a fragile word for something already broken. Daniel laughed lightly. We're just making sure everything is structured. Structured. There it was again, a system built on my silence. A plan financed by my name. At 7:42 p.m., Patricia placed her hand gently over mine. A performance. For the audience. We're so lucky to have you with us, Dad, she said. I looked at her, really looked, at the precision in her expression, the calculation behind the warmth. Then I looked around the table, at the strangers discussing my house like a spreadsheet, at my son nodding along, avoiding my eyes, at the numbers I already knew by heart. $468,000 approved, $245,000 withdrawn, $118,450 already gone before that. Total exposure, $363,450. Not potential, not projected, real, present, irreversible. At least that's what they believed. I withdrew my hand slowly. The room didn't notice. They rarely do. Noise hides absence very well. I think, I said quietly, setting my fork down, we should talk about the future. That got their attention. Patricia turned to me, smile still in place. Of course, Dad. What would you like to discuss? I leaned back slightly. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself a small, precise smile. The structure, I said. Mark nodded approvingly. Daniel looked confused. Patricia paused, just for a second. But I saw it, and that was enough. Because in that moment, she realized something she hadn't considered before. I was still paying attention. The letter arrived on September 14th. Certified mail, 9:36 a.m. Patricia signed for it before I could reach the door. Probably nothing important, she said, already turning away. Let me see it. My voice was calm, too calm. She hesitated. That was new. Then she handed over, reluctantly. The envelope was thick, legal. I recognized the return address immediately. Halpern and Associates, Legal Services. Gregory had moved faster than I expected. Good. What is it? Daniel asked from the hallway. I didn't answer right away. I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, letting the paper slide out with a soft, unmistakable sound. Some sounds carry weight. This was one of them. I read the first line, then the second. Then I folded it neatly and placed it on the table. It's about the house, I said. Patricia's posture changed. Subtle, but precise. What about it, she asked. I looked at her. Directly. Forensic audit, I said. Financial review. Immediate suspension of all credit line activity. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that exposes things. That doesn't make any sense, Daniel said quickly. Too quickly. Why would? Because I requested it, I replied. That stopped him. Patricia recovered first. Of course she did. She always did. There must be some misunderstanding, she said, stepping closer, her voice softening into that familiar tone of concern. You probably don't remember signing everything. We went over it together. Yes, I said. We did. And you agreed. I signed, I interrupted. A pause. Important distinction. I didn't agree. Daniel frowned. What's the difference? I turned to him slowly. The difference, I said, is about $400,000. That landed. Hard. I could see it in his face. The calculation. The sudden attempt to reorganize reality into something manageable. Patricia didn't speak. She was watching me now, carefully, reassessing. There's more, I added. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small object on the table. Black, rectangular, silent. The recorder. I've been keeping notes, I said. That was a lie. Notes can be dismissed. Recordings cannot. Patricia's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Still calm, but not relaxed. Dad, she said slowly, I think you're confused. Of course I was. That had always been the plan. I almost smiled. Am I? I asked. I pressed a button. A click. Then her voice filled the kitchen. Clear. Precise. Once the line of credit clears were covered, another click. Daniel's voice this time. He won't understand the paperwork. Silence. Real silence now. Unavoidable. Daniel stepped back. Wait, what is this? I didn't answer him. I was looking at Patricia, because this was her moment, her move, her strategy. She could deny, deflect, attack. Instead, she did something smarter. She shifted tone. You been spying on us? She asked quietly. There it was. Reversal. Make me the problem. Make me the violation. A good move. Too late. I've been listening, I corrected. To what? Daniel snapped. Private conversations? In my house, I said. That ended that line of argument. The phone rang at 10:12. Perfect timing. I didn't move. Answer it, I said. Patricia hesitated, then picked up. Yes. A pause. Her face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Yes, this is she. Another pause. See, longer this time. No, we weren't aware. Lie. Small. Automatic. Reflexive. I almost respected it. She hung up slowly. Daniel stared at her. Well, her voice, when it came, was different. Tighter. Controlled. That was the bank, she said. They've frozen the credit line. Of course they had. Gregory was thorough. And, I asked. She swallowed. For now, all transactions are under review. For now. Another useful phrase. Temporary. Reversible. Hopeful. For them. I nodded once. Good, I said. Then I picked up the letter and tapped it lightly against the table. There's a meeting scheduled, I added. September 21, ST.2:00 p.m. With who? Daniel asked. With everyone who matters, I replied. I let that sit for a moment. Then I stood up slowly, my joints reminding me of my age. 72. Old enough to be underestimated. Young enough to correct that mistake. I suggest, I said, looking at both of them. You don't make any plans that day. I turned toward the hallway, paused, and added almost casually, you'll want to be there, because some conversations are better held in public. September 21st, 2023, 1:52 p.m. I arrived 8 minutes early. Old habit. Respect for time is one of the few disciplines that doesn't fade with age. Halpern and Associates occupied the third floor of a glass building downtown. Too modern for my taste. Everything reflective. Everything transparent. Appropriate under the circumstances. The conference room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. A long table. 8 chairs. Water glasses placed with geometric precision. I chose the seat at the far end, not the head, the observer's position. Let them wonder why. Gregory entered at exactly 1:58, carrying a thin folder. "You're early," he said. "I prefer clarity," I replied. He nodded. "You'll have it today." Good. That made 2 of us. They arrived at 2:03. Late. Not dramatically. Just enough to signal discomfort. Daniel first. Jacket wrinkled, eyes unfocused. Patricia followed. Composed. Controlled. Dressed in a pale gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly expenses. Appearances matter most when reality starts to crack. "Dad," Daniel said, forcing a smile. "What is all this?" I didn't answer. I let Gregory speak. "Please have a seat," he said professionally. They did. Across from me. Opposite ends of the table. Interesting. Even now they weren't aligned. At 2:07, the others entered. A bank representative, Ms. Alvarez, mid-50s, sharp eyes. A second man, legal counsel from the credit institution. And finally, a woman Patricia did not expect. "Margaret," she said, unable to hide the surprise. "My accountant. 40 years. She nodded politely. I thought it best to attend. Patricia didn't like that. I could tell. Gregory closed the door, sat down, opened the folder. "Let's begin," he said. What followed was not dramatic. No shouting. No accusations thrown across the table. Just facts. Structured. Sequential. Unavoidable. Between March and August 2023, Gregory began. A total of $363,450 was withdrawn or allocated from Mr. Whitaker's accounts and credit facilities. Papers slid across the table. Statements, dates, signatures. Many of these transactions, he continued, were authorized under a general access agreement granted to Mrs. Patricia Whitaker. Patricia didn't react. Not yet. However, he added, authorization does not eliminate fiduciary responsibility. There it was. The word that changes everything. Responsibility. Ms. Alvarez leaned forward. "The pattern of withdrawals raises concerns," she said calmly, "particularly in relation to the recently established home equity line of credit." "Everything was signed," Patricia said, her voice steady, with full awareness. Gregory looked at her. "Was it?" he asked. A pause. Small, but visible. I reached into my coat pocket, placed the recorder on the table. Didn't press play. Didn't need to. The silence around it was louder than any recording. Daniel stared at it like it might explode. Patricia didn't look at it at all. That told me everything. Margaret spoke next. "In my professional opinion," she said, adjusting her glasses, "Mr. Whitaker's financial behavior prior to March 2023 shows consistent, conservative management over 4 decades." She tapped the documents lightly. "This pattern changes abruptly following third-party involvement." Third party. Such a clean way to describe betrayal. Daniel shifted in his seat. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We were helping him." "By taking over $300,000? Ms. Alvarez asked. No answer. Because there wasn't one. Patricia finally leaned forward. Measured. Controlled. "You're making this sound like something it isn't," she said. "We acted in his best interest." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I spoke. First time since the meeting began. "My best interest," I said quietly, "never included disappearing from my own life." That landed, not loudly, but permanently. Gregory closed the folder. "The bank has formally frozen the credit line," he said. "Further, we are initiating recovery procedures for misallocated funds." Recovery. Another important word. Not all losses are final. Some just require patience. "And the house?" Daniel asked, his voice tighter now. I leaned back slightly. "The house," I said, "remains exactly where it has always been." A pause. Then I added, "Mine." They didn't argue after that. There was nothing left to argue with. Numbers don't negotiate. Records don't forget. And silence, when used correctly, can be the loudest verdict of all. When the meeting ended, Patricia stood up slowly. For the first time since I had known her, she looked uncertain, not defeated. Not yet. But close enough. "Dad," she began. I raised a hand. Not sharply. Just enough. "No," I said. One word. Clean. Final. I walked out of the building alone. The afternoon air felt different. lighter, clearer, like a room after the windows have been opened. Some things were still unresolved. Money takes time to return. Trust doesn't return at all. But the structure had changed. And this time, I was the one who built it. I got into my car, placed the keys in the ignition, and paused for a moment. 72 years old, widowed, alone, but no longer mistaken for weak. I started the engine, allowed myself a small, tired smile, and said quietly, to no one in particular, they came for what was left. Then I shifted into drive. They should have checked what was still standing.